Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, thanks for your indulgence. We're working through a point of order. We are here on House Joint Resolution 26. Members, this HJR would give our constituents, the people of the state of Texas, the opportunity to vote on a constitutional amendment to raise the state minimum wage to $10.10. Whether you agree or not on raising the minimum wage, and whether you think it's a good idea, what we can all agree on is that our constituents deserve an opportunity to decide. We have put some propositions before them before. We have talked about putting more propositions for them. We trust their judgment. Let's trust them with the opportunity to better themselves and to improve the lives of our fellow Texans. No Texan working full-time should live in poverty. Minimum wage in Texas now means families that are currently living in poverty. For those folks earning the current minimum wage, working 40 hours a week, 52 weeks per year, we're talking about $15,000, which is well below the federal poverty line for a family of two or more. The Center for Public Policy Priorities reported in April that Texas ranks near the worst in states for working families, with 38% earning less than $47,000 per year for a family of four. Last month, a study on economic segregation in America found that 4 of the 10 most economically segregated large U.S. metros, those that have populations of 1 million or more, are in Texas. They're in Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas. Raising the minimum wage would help 2.4 million Texans. That is 1 in 4, both for-profit and nonprofit workers. In January of 2014, over 600 economists from across the United States, including many from Texas, signed a letter in support of a $10.10 minimum wage increase, stating that the vast majority of employees who would benefit are adults in working families, disproportionately women, who depend on these earnings to make ends meet. The letter further stated that in recent years there have been important developments in the academic literature on the effects of the increases in the minimum wage on employment, with the weight of the evidence now showing that increases in minimum wage have had little or no negative impact on the employment of minimum wage workers, even during those times of weakness in the labor market. And to further show you that this is not a partisan issue, many people seem to think that increasing the minimum wage should be decided along party lines. If you just look to the election results of last November, there were a number of states, conservative states, like Arkansas, Nebraska, Alaska, and South Dakota, all voting to increase the minimum wages in their states to different amounts, but they voted to increase the minimum wage. And 2 years prior to that, in the state of New Jersey, while electing Governor Christie for another term as governor of the state of New Jersey, the residents of New Jersey also voted to increase minimum wage in that state. This is not something that should divide us among partisan lines. This is not something that we should be dismissive about. This is not giving an opportunity for a college student or giving an opportunity for a young person who's working part-time to earn more money. This is an opportunity to give working families, working parents, people who are paying for their household expenses, paying for the care of their children, putting money in the bank to put food on the table. We're talking about giving them an opportunity to vote, to improve their lives, something that we talk about all the time on this House floor, which is the notion of personal responsibility. Take the responsibility to work and earn money so that you can provide for your family, and at the same time, reduce your reliance on the government for government assistance. When you increase wages, those things happen. And so that is what we're simply asking for this very simple vote. We're not asking the voters of the state of Texas to do something they don't understand. When it comes to putting money in their pocketbooks, when it comes to putting food on the table, clothes on their back, medicine in the medicine cabinet, people's wages is their livelihood. And if we have an opportunity to let them decide whether they want to increase the minimum wage, we talk about it all the time. We did something, one of the very first bills we passed on this House floor was a multi-million, hundreds of millions of dollars for border security, and we did it with the theme that if the federal government's not going to do it, we need to step up to that responsibility. There have been attempts to have a national increase to the minimum wage. That has not happened. It may not happen. And we have an opportunity to at least make that a reality for our Texans here in this state by letting them go to the polls and deciding for themselves whether this is a good idea for themselves and for their families.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Blanco, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Mr. Martinez-Fisher, do you yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Representative Martinez, we talk a lot about Texas priding themselves on working hard and being self-sufficient, and Texans are hardworking. And you recently had a roundtable in San Antonio with Secretary of Labor Tom Perez, and you heard a lot of stories of these hardworking Texans. Can you tell me a little bit about the stories that you heard
Yes,
from folks in San Antonio?
thank you for the question. You were right. In the summer of last year, United States Secretary of Labor Tom Perez came to San Antonio and hosted a roundtable at San Antonio College and heard from women who are working, cleaning houses, taking care of children, women who are providing some of the hardest work that you can ask for. And they were talking about, believe it or not a minimum wage. They were talking about a living wage and what a living wage would be, so that the people who provide the most basic set of services for folks in this state, what they would need to earn so that they can also provide for themselves and their children, perhaps get health care in a state that doesn't have a viable health care pathway, to perhaps afford to put their children in enrichment programs, give them a better educational experience because of the lack of opportunities and access in the current public education system, given some of the shortcomings and the shortfalls and the financial deficiencies in the school system. And Secretary Perez listened to them for a great amount of time. And so it would probably shock you, but I'm sure you know, that $10.10 doesn't even solve their problems. $10.10 may improve their situation, but if you want to look at what a single person would have to earn in a place like Austin, for instance, it isn't $10.10 per hour, it's $14.09. If you're living in Brownsville, it's $11.78 per hour. If you're from Dallas, $13.84. El Paso, $11.60. Houston, $14.05. Lubbock, $12.15. McAllen, $11.88. And in San Antonio, $12.86. So again, thinking that this is a solution, it's not. It is an improvement, but it is a reasonable step forward considering what the current minimum wage is here in the state of Texas.
So the current minimum wage is $7.25. So how much would that be a year for someone who's working 40 hours a week?
In a full calendar year, that's about $15,000, a little bit over $15,000.
$15,000. And at what percentage of Texans earn less than $47,000 per year for a family of four?
You know, Representative Blanco, I would defer to you if you have that number, but I think it's somewhere around 40%, if not close to 40%.
Absolutely.
It's a significant number. I mean, we are very proud in Texas to be the Texas miracle of creating jobs and growing this economy. But the Texas miracle has not reached those who have helped build it. They have not reached those rank and file hourly paid employees. And while we may lead the nation in lots of respects when it comes to growing this economy, we also lead the nation with the highest number of Texans, or the largest number of Texans earning minimum wage. And that is a designation that we should not be proud of.
And are you aware that there are 1.95 million Texans that would be directly affected by an increase of minimum wage?
I believe that I do know that data point, and I also know too that for those employees, it also has a direct benefit on their employers, because I think that business metrics, economists, everybody will tell you that the more money you pay your employees, the less attrition you have. You don't have the employee turnover. You don't have those reoccurring job training costs that will certainly be incurred when you're having to refill those positions. And frankly, it also decreases the amount of losses that are sometimes realized by these employers when they have employees who are perhaps taking from the company, whether it be groceries off the shelf or things in the stockroom. These decisions sometimes are made because of, their economic decisions, and the science tells us, and the business tells us, business math tells us, when you treat your employees better, you provide a good living wage for them, they're going to perform better in the workplace. You're going to have reduced costs in keeping them, and you're also going to add some money to your bottom line.
Well, I appreciate that. And, in my city, in El Paso, you had indicated that this would be at $11.60 for someone to make a living wage. And in our county, in El Paso, 40% of workers would get a pay increase. So I think this is a step in the right direction, and I appreciate your hard work and moving this forward.
Thank you, Representative.
Mr. Speaker, may I just ask, Mr. Speaker, I have one question,
Mr.
please.
Gutierrez, for what purpose?
This question
Mr. Martinez-Fisher, do you yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Representative Martinez-Fisher, Mike, there's a lot of people here that talk about state sovereignty. Don't you think it's time that we tell the federal government that enough is enough? Don't you think that it's time that we can do better, and we at the state of Texas should tell the federal government that $7.25 an hour is just simply not acceptable? 10 major companies in the United States have already gone to $10 and above, and we can do better as Texans, and we can certainly do better than the federal government. Is that not correct?
That is correct, and I'll tell you later on this calendar, we're going to consider a measure that is going to ask the OBB to do a study to look at the effect of federal mandates on the state of Texas. Well, the mandate that we will send to our local economies and our local governments when we suppress these wages and make these families more and more dependent on the government. I hear, example after example on this floor, respectfully, where this body says we need to be less dependent on government. When you raise wages, you are becoming less dependent on the government. You may not qualify for temporary assistance. You may not qualify for Section 8 benefits. You may not qualify for children's health insurance. When we let families improve their lives through increased wages, then guess what? They can take care of their own circumstances, hopefully, and they become less reliant. So I think that there is a very clear conservative thread here that folks should really take time to think about. If we truly want to foster and encourage personal responsibility, it begins in the workplace. It begins with their pocketbooks. It begins with giving them the economic freedom that they need to have that personal responsibility.
Well, I think you've made some very good points for working class families, but for all those lovers of liberty and state sovereignty, it's high time we stand up and tell the federal government they're wrong. It's high time we stand up and tell the federal government that enough is enough, and that we as Texans can do better. So I applaud you and champion for the bill that you have today.
Thank you, Representative.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield?
Mr. Martinez-Fisher, do you yield from
I
Mr.
yield.
Lucio? Gentleman
Thank
yields.
you. Representative, when you laid out either this measure or a similar measure in committee, I laid out that a same or similar bill, correct?
You did, yes.
And part of the debate there was, and some of the information that I tried to share was that, this increase in cost will come back tenfold to the businesses in the community because people have more discretionary income. They have more income to buy the goods and services that are often just a basic necessity, correct?
That's correct. And then you add on top of that, this body is contemplating lowering our state sales tax. You lower the state sales tax, you increase wages. These families are not the families with IRAs and savings accounts. These are the families that cash their checks and go pay bills, buy groceries, pay for their car insurance. This money goes back into the economy. It's the Henry Ford model. And I will also, as you know, when we had this debate, there was discussion that, well, why should we pay people more money when, we have interns that do this kind of work? And I think you and I were lamenting in committee that there's not an intern that's going to go to a fast food restaurant and prepare food for free. There's not an intern that's going to go and clean somebody's house, take care of somebody's children, mow somebody's lawn. They're not going to do that for college credit.
One of the other questions that came up is where did we come up with this $10 amount? What is the math or the science behind that? Number one, and number two, if you could just kind of discuss the point is in my community, when I have constituents come to my office and they're asking for help, they typically tell me we can't get off government assistance because the gap from doing that and not taking a better paying job will not help my quality of life, will not be able to make ends meet and put that food on the table. That's kind of the argument I get is I want to take a better paying job, but that next paying job is such a small increase in salary that it doesn't make sense for me to be able to make ends meet to get off of some of the programs that they're on.
And I think about that, and when that discussion is taking place, and we're being told that by members of this body, I think about raising the minimum wage by a few dollars per hour versus what we receive in a daily per diem, clearly much higher than a minimum wage, and sort of the notion that it's okay in one set of circumstances to have a standard of living because of the service and the things we provide in the state of Texas, but when it comes to those that we are charged with caring for and governing for, to give them that freedom. Now, again, I'm not talking about passing a law and putting a mandate on Texas businesses to pay this money. I'm talking about putting this before the voters and let them decide. And if they truly are against this, we will know about it. You've seen these elections; these aren't slam dunks. Some win and some lose. And an issue like this, I think that it's going to touch people at the very bottom of the economic ladder, and they're going to show their choice with that vote. And that's really the fundamental thing that we do here every day is we vote and make decisions on their behalf. I'm saying, look, it's not about us. Let's let people back home decide. And I'd be very proud to put this before the voters, win or lose, to know that the voters decided this measure and that we didn't take the bullet from anybody. We let voters do this back home.
Right. One of the things that's just disheartening is when people use things as the norm when they're just outliers, examples of people abusing the system. No matter what system you have and what context, there's always going to be those that abuse the system, but those are few and far between. Majority of the people from the hardworking, poverty-stricken areas that you and I represent are hardworking people who only use programs needed in the most dire of needs, and typically just are trying to find that good job. And this would go a long way towards a path of helping them find that good job.
No, I agree, and thank you for making that point. And we make daily decisions about providing tax exemptions, giving tax rebates, giving business incentives to these employers. And all we really ask these employers, in really when you drill down to it, we ask them to give us some jobs back. And so if all we're going to say is when you give us those jobs back, please let them pay a minimum wage of $10.10, not legislatively approved, but voter approved. You want to be a good partner, you want to be a good citizen of this state of Texas, can't you afford to increase that? Now, bear in mind, there are many companies that are already paying in excess of $10.10 an hour. There are some companies that are right under it. And there are a number of companies, Fortune 100 companies, mom and pops, that are already right at that threshold. So we're not asking them to do something that's impossible. We're just asking them to give voters an opportunity to take control of their economic destiny and forging that partnership with those who give them jobs.
Like Chairman Thompson would say, this is for the little dog.
Representative Schaefer raised a point of order. The gentleman's time expired. Point of order.
This is a little dog bill. You're right.
Chair recognizes Representative Phillips for a motion.